The bunker doors opened for the first time in 47 days. Commander Lena Morris stepped out into a world transformed by violence. The air smelled of burning and death. Smoke rose from 100 fires across the landscape. The ground was covered with Vrexian bodies, their insectoid forms broken and scattered like leaves after a storm. The siege lines that had surrounded the bunker for nearly 2 months were gone, replaced by craters and wreckage and the silent dead. Lena walked forward slowly. Behind her, the surviving coalition soldiers followed in small groups. Tellerny, Kolvathi, humans. They moved carefully, their eyes wide with shock, unable to fully believe what they were seeing. A single Deathbringer stood waiting near the bunker entrance. The black-armored figure was perfectly still, weapon held at rest. Helmet reflecting the armed sky like a dark mirror dot as Lena approached. The Deathbringer reached up and removed the helmet. The face beneath was human. Young-looking, with close-cut brown hair and pale blue eyes. A man, perhaps 30 years old in appearance, with features that might have been handsome if they had shown any expression at all. His face was as empty as a painting, smooth and calm and utterly without feeling. "Commander Morris," the Deathbringer said. His voice was soft, almost gentle. "I am Sergeant Kevin Dale. The threat has been eliminated. You and your people are safe." Lena looked past him at the field of bodies stretching to the horizon. Safe. The word felt strange in her mouth when she tried to repeat it. How many were there? She asked. "How many Vrexians?" 10,407 ground forces. 312 ships in orbit. Kevin's voice did not change as he recited the numbers. "All eliminated. No survivors." "No survivors," Lena repeated. "You killed all of them, even the ones who tried to surrender. The Covenant of Last Resort requires complete elimination." Kevin's pale eyes met hers without blinking. "We followed our orders." Lieutenant Damon Price had come up beside Lena. He was staring at Kevin with an expression that mixed horror and fascination. "How?" he asked. 36 of you against 10,000. How is that possible?" "We were designed for this purpose," Kevin said simply. "We were made to be effective." Ambassador Cerise emerged from the bunker, her blue skin still dim from weeks of stress and fear. She looked at Kevin for a long moment, then turned to study the battlefield around them. When she spoke, her voice was heavy with something Lena could not name. "Sergeant, I am the one who invoked the Covenant. I called your people here." "Yes, Ambassador. We received your transmission. I want you to know that I did so to save lives." Cerise gestured at the survivors behind her. "These people would have died without your intervention. The Vrexians would have shown no mercy." "I understand, Ambassador." Kevin's expression did not change. "You made the correct tactical decision. Did I?" Cerise looked at the bodies covering the ground. "I saved 90 lives by taking more than 10,000. I am not sure that mathematics works in my favor." Kevin was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, there was something in his voice that might have been confusion, or might have been nothing at all. The enemy chose to attack. They knew the risks. They accepted the consequences. Did they? Cerise shook her head slowly. Did they know that weapons like you existed? Did they understand what they were facing when they started this siege? It does not matter what they knew. Kevin replaced his helmet. His voice came through slightly muffled now, stripped of what little humanity it had shown. They were a threat. We eliminated the threat. That is our function. He turned and walked away, rejoining the other Deathbringers who were moving across the battlefield. They were not celebrating their victory. They were not resting after the fight. They were gathering data, recording the results, preparing reports that would be sent back to Earth's hidden military commands. Lena watched them work. They moved among the bodies like machines, efficient and emotionless, treating the dead with neither respect nor contempt. The corpses were simply data points, evidence of a job completed. They are not human anymore, are they? Damon asked quietly. I do not know what they are. Lena thought about Kevin's empty eyes, his gentle voice, the complete absence of reaction to the slaughter he had committed. Maybe they were human once. Maybe some part of them still is. But what I just saw, they are what humans become when they stop pretending. Cerise spoke softly, as if to herself. When they strip away the masks they wear for the rest of the galaxy. This is the truth that Earth is hidden for a century. This is what lives in your species when all the gentleness is removed. Lena wanted to argue with that. She wanted to say that the Deathbringers were special, different, that most humans were not capable of such cold and calculated violence. But she thought about human history, about the wars and genocides and atrocities that her species had committed long before they met the stars. She thought about the capacity for destruction that lived in every human heart, and she was not sure she could argue Dot in the days that followed. The Harbinger remained in orbit while its crew secured the system. Coalition rescue ships arrived, bringing supplies and medical aid and replacement personnel. Reports were filed. Explanations were demanded. Political arguments began in distant capitals about what the invocation of the Covenant would mean for human coalition relations. The surviving soldiers of Calveth Prime were evacuated to a medical station. They were treated for their physical wounds, offered counseling for their psychological ones, and eventually released to return to their duties. Most of them never spoke about what they had seen. The official records described a standard military relief operation. But rumors spread anyway. They always did. Whispers passed from ship to ship, from station to station, from world to world. Stories about humans who were not really human. Weapons that wore human faces. Monsters that Earth kept hidden in the darkness. The galaxy had known about humanity for almost a century. They had thought they understood the small species from the blue planet. They had seen humans as clever and adaptable, sometimes violent, but ultimately manageable. Junior partners in a galactic community that would guide them toward civilization. Now they were not so sure. 3 months after the siege ended, Lena Morris stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city of the Coalition homeworld. Ambassador Cerise stood beside her, watching the lights of the city spread out below like scattered stars. The Council has voted to maintain the human alliance, Cerise said. They feel that Earth's capabilities make them too valuable to alienate, and too dangerous to anger. So we stay partners, Lena said. We keep smiling and cooperating and pretending that nothing has changed. What else can we do? Cerise's bioluminescent skin pulsed with soft blue light. The humans have proven that they can destroy fleets and armies when they choose. If we tried to oppose them, tried to contain them, tried to strip away their secret weapons, how would that end? Lena did not answer. She thought about Kevin Dale's empty eyes. She thought about 36 soldiers cutting through 10,000 enemies like fire through dry grass. She thought about what other secrets might be hiding in Earth's dark places. They sent 600 Deathbringers to save us, she said finally. 36 of them killed 10,000 Rexians without losing a single soldier. If they ever decided to use all 600, then nothing in the galaxy could stop them. Cerise was quiet for a moment. And that, I think, is exactly what the humans wanted us to understand. Far away, in hidden facilities beneath Earth's surface, the Deathbringers returned to their routines. They trained and maintained their equipment and waited for the next call. They did not celebrate their victory on Calveth Prime. They did not mourn the enemies they had killed. They simply existed, patient and deadly, ready to be unleashed again whenever humanity needed them. The galaxy had asked for reinforcements. What they had received were Deathbringers, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. Warlord Sithax sat on his command throne aboard the Dominion warship, Eternal Conquest, and watched the fleeing Volanthi convoy with cold satisfaction. His fleet of 47 ships had been chasing these refugees for 3 cycles. Now, finally, the hunt was ending. Sithax was a Korax warrior in his prime, standing 8 feet tall with armored skin the color of dried blood. His species had evolved on a harsh world where only the strongest survived. They had carried that philosophy to the stars, conquering everything in their path. "Report," he growled. "The praise engines are failing," his subordinate replied. "They will be within optimal firing range in 4 hours. They cannot escape." "Excellent." Sithax leaned back, flexing his clawed hands. "Prepare the boarding parties. I want prisoners." The young ones sell well in the slave markets. He felt no guilt. The Volanthi had been weak, and the weak existed to serve the strong. This was the natural order of things. The Dominion had conquered 1,000 worlds by following this simple truth. Species that resisted were destroyed. Species that submitted became slaves. There was no third option. The Volanthi had chosen to resist. Now they would pay the price. "Warlord," his communications officer suddenly called out. "I am detecting something strange." "Explain." "Multiple spatial distortions. They are forming directly between us and the Volanthi convoy." Sithax frowned. "How many?" 27. "No, wait. They are not distortions." The officer's voice grew uncertain. "They are portals. Something is coming through." Space itself seemed to tear open. 27 holes appeared in the fabric of reality, blazing with brilliant white light. And from those holes came ships. Sithax had never seen vessels like these. They were angular and aggressive, covered in weapons that glowed with strange energy. They moved into formation with perfect precision, positioning themselves between the Korax fleet and the Volanthi convoy. "What are they?" Sithax demanded. "Who are they?" Before anyone could answer, a transmission came through on all frequencies. A face appeared on the main view screen, a face unlike any species in the Dominion's vast database. It had soft skin, small eyes, and hair only on the top of its head. It looked fragile, almost weak, but its voice was calm and steady. "Attention, Korax fleet. This is Admiral Benjamin Pierce of the United Earth Space Navy. We have received a distress signal from the Volanthi convoy. These civilians are now under our protection. You will stand down immediately." Sithax stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he started to laugh. "Under your protection?" He leaned forward, showing his fangs. "Foolish creature. I do not know where you come from or what gave you the courage to interfere with the Dominion, but you have made a fatal mistake. These refugees are our property. We have hunted them across 3 star systems. You will not take our prey." The human admiral did not seem impressed. "I'm giving you 1 chance to turn your ships around and leave. Take it. 1 chance?" Sithax's laughter grew louder. "I have 47 warships. You have 27. We have conquered species far more powerful than whatever your kind is. What makes you think you can threaten us?" Admiral Pierce smiled slightly. It was not a nervous smile or a fearful smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something his enemy did not. "Because we're humans," he said simply, "and we don't let bullies hurt innocent people. Then you have chosen death." Sithax cut the transmission and turned to his weapons officer. "All ships, open fire. Full barrage. Destroy them." On the Volanthi convoy, Ambassador Thelavin watched the impossible scene unfold with trembling hands. Ships had appeared from nowhere, placing themselves between her people and certain death. The alien, the human, had looked at her through the view screen with kind eyes and told her not to be afraid. "Ambassador," Korath whispered beside her, "what is happening? Who are these beings?" "I do not know," she replied. "But they answered our call." They actually answered. The Korax fleet opened fire. Hundreds of plasma bolts and kinetic rounds screamed through space toward the human ships. It was enough firepower to crack open a small moon. Delavin closed her eyes, certain she was about to witness the destruction of her only hope. The destruction never came. When she opened her eyes, the human ships were still there, completely unharmed. Their shields had absorbed everything the Korax threw at them. She saw smaller bursts of light around each vessel, thousands of tiny explosions where human weapons had intercepted incoming fire before it could hit. "That's impossible," Korath breathed. "No one can block a full Korax barrage." On the bridge of the U-East Defiant, Admiral Pierce watched the attack with professional interest. Around him, his crew worked their consoles with calm efficiency. "Damage report," he requested. "None, sir," Lieutenant Vance replied. "Their weapons are primarily thermal and kinetic. Our shields didn't even notice them." Captain Grant shook her head in amazement. "They really can't hurt us. No, they can't." Pierce straightened in his chair. "But they tried. They had a chance to walk away, and they chose violence." He took a deep breath. "Signal all ships. Return fire. Precision targeting only. I want their weapons disabled, not their crews killed. We're not murderers." The human fleet responded as one. Railguns fired streams of hypervelocity rounds. Energy beams lanced out with surgical accuracy. Missiles streaked toward the Korax ships on trails of blue fire. The Korax had never faced anything like it. "Warlord." Sivax gripped his throne as explosions rocked his ship. All around him, damage reports flooded in from across the fleet. Forward batteries destroyed. Shield generators failing. The crushing fist has lost main propulsion. "How?" Sivax roared. "How are they doing this?" "They're targeting specific systems," his tactical officer reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "They're not trying to destroy our ships. They're disabling them, like a surgeon cutting away exactly what they want. Then ram them. Use the ships themselves as weapons." The human voice cut through the chaos. "I wouldn't recommend that, Warlord." Admiral Pierce appeared on the view screen again, as calm as if he were discussing the weather. "Your engines are next on our list if you try to close the distance. You can still walk away from this. Take your fleet and leave. This is your last warning." Sivax felt something cold in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize it. Fear. He had not felt fear since he was a child on the killing fields of his homeworld. But looking at these human ships, at their impossible technology and their quiet confidence, he felt it now. "You don't understand what you've done," he snarled. "The Dominion will never forgive this. We will find your homeworld. We will burn it to ash. Every single one of your kind will suffer." Pierce nodded thoughtfully. "You're not the first to threaten Earth, Warlord. You won't be the last. But here's something you should remember." He leaned forward slightly. "If 27 of our ships can do this to your fleet, imagine what happens when we send the rest of them." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Sithax gave an order he had never given before. "All ships, retreat. Full withdrawal." His officers stared at him in shock. The Korax did not retreat. They had never retreated. But Sithax had looked into the human's eyes and seen something that chilled him to his core. He had seen no fear at all. The Korax fleet limped into hyperspace, leaving behind the debris of their shattered weapons. And in the Velanti convoy, 12,000 survivors watched them go. Unable to believe what they had just witnessed, Ambassador Thelavin sank to her knees and wept. Not from sorrow, but from something she had forgotten existed: hope. The human fleet surrounded the Velanti convoy like a protective shell. Medical ships moved alongside the damaged transports, ready to help. Engineering teams prepared to repair failing systems. And on the bridge of the U.S. Defiant, Admiral Pierce watched it all with quiet satisfaction. "Open a channel to the Volante flagship," he ordered. Ambassador Thelavan's face appeared on the view screen. Her skin had shifted from gray to a soft blue, the color of peace and gratitude in her species. Tears still glistened on her cheeks. "Admiral Pierce," she said, her voice breaking, "I do not have words. My people were ready to die. We had accepted our fate. And then you came. That's what we do, Ambassador." Pierce's voice was gentle. "Are your people safe? Do you have injured?" "Many injured. Some badly. Our medical supplies ran out days ago. We'll take care of it. Our ships carry enough medicine and food for 3 times your population." Pierce paused. "Ambassador, we have a station not far from here. A place we built for situations exactly like this. It's called Sanctuary Point. Would you allow us to take your convoy there?" Thalavan pressed her hand against the screen, a gesture of deep thanks in her culture. "We would be honored, Admiral. But I must ask you something. I must understand. Ask anything. Why?" The question carried the weight of everything she had experienced. You crossed 300 light years to answer a signal from a species you had never met. You risked your ships and your people's lives for strangers. The Korax would have destroyed you without hesitation if they could. Why would you do this? Pierce was quiet for a moment. He looked around his bridge at the young officers who had followed him into the unknown. Then he turned back to the ambassador. "A long time ago," he began, "humanity was not much different from the Korax. We fought each other constantly. We killed millions of our own kind in wars. We nearly destroyed our planet with pollution and weapons. We were cruel and selfish and afraid." Thelavan listened, her large eyes wide with attention. "But we changed," Pierce continued. "Slowly, painfully, we learned. We learned that helping others made us stronger, not weaker. We learned that compassion was not a flaw, but a gift. We learned that the true measure of a civilization is not how it treats the powerful, but how it treats the helpless." He smiled softly. "We're not perfect. We still make mistakes. But when we finally reached the stars, we made a promise to ourselves. We would not spread the darkness we had overcome. We would bring light instead. And the Korax? They will return. They will seek revenge. Let them come." There was no boasting in Pierce's voice, only certainty. "We faced worse than them. We faced ourselves. And we're still here." The journey to Sanctuary Point took 4 days. During that time, human medical teams worked around the clock to heal the wounded Volante. Engineers repaired damaged ships. Counselors helped traumatized children. Food and water flowed freely to people who had been rationing for weeks. Ambassador Thelavan spent much of the journey talking with Commander Lisa Daniels, who had been assigned to help the refugees settle in. The 2 women, so different in form, discovered they were similar in spirit. "Tell me about your world," Thelavan requested one evening. "Tell me about Earth." Daniel smiled and called up images on a holographic display. Blue oceans and green forests. Snow-capped mountains and golden deserts. Cities that sparkled at night and villages tucked into quiet valleys. "It's not perfect," Daniels admitted. "We still have problems, poverty, inequality, people who hate others for foolish reasons. But we're working on it. Every generation does a little better than the one before." "It sounds beautiful." "It is." Daniels hesitated, then added, "We almost lost it, you know?" "Several times. There was a period about 300 years ago when we came very close to nuclear war. Our entire species could have been wiped out in an afternoon. What saved you? Ordinary people. They refused to let it happen. They protested and voted and demanded better from their leaders. They chose hope over fear." Daniels looked at the ambassador with warm eyes. "That's the thing about humans, Ambassador. We're stubborn. When we decide something matters, we don't give up. Ever. Sanctuary Point was not what Thelevan had expected. She had imagined a small outpost, perhaps a few buildings on some remote moon. Instead, she found herself staring at an enormous space station orbiting a beautiful garden world. The station was shaped like a flower, with a central hub and 6 massive arms extending outward. Each arm contained living quarters, medical facilities, schools, and recreation areas. Ships from a dozen different species were docked at various points, and through the transparent sections of the hull, she could see people of all kinds going about their daily lives. "This is incredible," she breathed. Admiral Pierce stood beside her at the viewing port. "We built it 5 years ago, when we first started exploring this region of space. We knew we would encounter other civilizations. We hoped some would be friendly. But we also prepared for the possibility that some would be like the Korax. You built all this for refugees? For people you had never met? We built it because we remembered what it felt like to be homeless, to be scared, to have nowhere to go." Pierce watched a Volanti family being guided off a transport by smiling human volunteers. "On Earth, we have a saying, be the person you needed when you were young. I suppose this station is something like that for our species. We're being the civilization we wished existed when we were struggling." Over the following weeks, the Volanti settled into their new temporary home. Children who had known only fear and running began to laugh again. Artists who had lost everything started creating new works. Scientists shared knowledge with their human counterparts, and both species marveled at what they could learn from each other. But not everyone was celebrating. In the station's strategic planning center, military officers from both species gathered to discuss what would come next. "The Korax will not accept this defeat," a Volanti elder named Velthos warned. He was old, his skin faded to muted colors, but his mind remained sharp. "Their entire civilization is built on the belief that the strong dominate the weak. You have challenged that belief. They will need to destroy you to prove themselves." General Patricia Walsh, commander of Earth's defensive forces, nodded grimly. "Our intelligence agrees. They're already mobilizing. The question is how much time we have." "Not much," Velthus replied. "The Dominion controls 300 star systems and has allies across half the galaxy. They have resources beyond anything you can imagine. Then we need resources of our own." Pierce stood at the head of the table, studying the star maps. "Ambassador Thelevan told me your people have extensive knowledge of this region. The species here, the powers, the political situations. We do. Then help us find allies. Help us find others who have suffered under the Dominion. Others who might be willing to stand with us." Velthus was quiet for a long moment. "You would fight a war for species you have never met? Risk your entire civilization for strangers?" Pierce met his eyes without hesitation. "We already did. And we'll do it again. As many times as we have to." The old Volanti's skin shifted slowly from faded gray to a deep, vibrant purple, a color Thelevan had not seen in years. The color of fierce determination. "Then let me tell you about the Mordathi," Velthos said, "and the Dormians, and a dozen other species who have been waiting for someone to give them hope." The war was coming. Everyone knew it. But for the first time in a very long time, the enemies of the Korax Dominion had something they had almost forgotten. They had someone willing to fight beside them. 6 months had passed since the battle that saved the Volanti convoy. In that time, the galaxy had begun to change in ways no one had predicted. It started small. A Mordathi trading ship arrived at Sanctuary Point, carrying representatives who wanted to meet the strange species that had humiliated the Korax. The Mordathi were a proud warrior race, tall and strong, with scales like polished bronze. They had fought the Dominion for centuries and lost every war. Now they wanted to know how humans had succeeded where they had failed. Admiral Pierce met them personally in the station's conference hall. The Mordathi delegation was led by Battle Commander Tarek, a veteran of 100 engagements who carried the scars to prove it. "We watched the recordings of your battle," Tarek said without preamble. "Your ships disabled 47 Corax warships without taking a single hit. Our finest fleet could not accomplish what your small force did with ease. How is this possible?" Pierce gestured for the Mordathi to sit. "Would you like something to drink? We have water, tea, something we call coffee." Tarek looked confused. "You offer refreshments to warriors who come asking about weapons?" "I offer courtesy to guests in my station." Pierce poured himself a cup of coffee. "As for your question, our technology is different from what this region of space has developed. We took a different path. That gives us certain advantages. We want this technology. I understand. And we're willing to share it under certain conditions." Tarek's eyes narrowed. "What conditions?" "First, any technology we share will be used only for defense, not conquest. Second, any species we ally with must agree to protect civilian populations, even enemy civilians. Third, we fight together or not at all. No separate wars, no private vendettas." The Mordathi commander was silent for a long moment. His culture valued strength and independence. The idea of submitting to rules set by another species went against everything he had been taught. But he had watched the battle recordings. He had seen what human weapons could do. And he had spent his entire life watching his people lose to the Corax. "These conditions," he said slowly, "they apply to you as well?" "Of course. We follow the same rules we ask others to follow. Why? You have the power to demand whatever you want. Why constrain yourselves?" Pierce sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "Because power without principle is just tyranny with better weapons. We've had empires on Earth, Commander. We've had conquerors who took whatever they wanted because they could. They all fell eventually. The only civilizations that lasted were the ones built on something more than force." Tarek studied the human admiral for a long time. Then, slowly, he extended his hand in the human gesture of agreement he had researched before arriving. "The Mordathi will accept your conditions," he said. "We will fight beside you." Pierce shook his hand firmly. "Welcome to the Compact of Free Peoples, Commander." The Mordathi were just the beginning. Word spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. A new power had risen in the outer regions. A species called humans who had technology beyond anything known. A species that answered distress calls from strangers. A species that offered alliance instead of subjugation. The Dormians came next. They were a small species, physically weak, but brilliant engineers and scientists. The Corax had enslaved them for generations, forcing them to build weapons for the Dominion. A group of rebels had escaped with stolen ships, and they came to Sanctuary Point seeking protection. Then the Talari arrived, a species of empaths who could feel the emotions of others. They had hidden from the Dominion for centuries, terrified that their abilities would be exploited. When they sensed the genuine compassion of the humans, they emerged from hiding. Then the Voss, the Harthan, the Kelmari, and a dozen others. Some were warriors. Some were scientists. Some were artists or farmers or teachers. But they all had one thing in common. They had suffered under the Corax, and they were ready to stand against them on Earth. President Marcus Webb addressed the United Nations with the most important speech in human history. "For generations," he began, "we have wondered if we were alone in the universe. Now we know the answer. We are not alone. Out there, among the stars, there are civilizations of incredible diversity and wonder. There are also civilizations of cruelty and conquest." He paused, looking at the representatives from every nation on Earth. 6 months ago, our fleet answered a distress signal. We saved 12,000 lives that day. Since then, we have been contacted by dozens of species seeking alliance, protection, and hope. They have asked us to stand with them against a power that has enslaved and destroyed countless worlds. The chamber was completely silent. I will not pretend this will be easy, Webb continued. The Corax Dominion is vast and powerful. War is coming whether we want it or not. They will not forgive what we have done, and they will not stop until they have proven that the strong can do whatever they wish to the weak. He straightened, his voice growing stronger. But I say this to them and to anyone else who believes that might makes right. You have never faced humanity united. You have never faced a species that turned its own near destruction into wisdom. You have never faced people who chose compassion over conquest, who built Sanctuary Point instead of death camps, who crossed 300 light years to help strangers, because helping strangers is what we do. The applause started slowly, then built into a roar that shook the building. Let the galaxy know, Webb concluded, that Earth's door is open to anyone fleeing tyranny. Let them know that we will fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. And let the Corax Dominion know that if they want a war, humanity will give them one they will never forget. Far across the galaxy, in the iron halls of the Dominion's capital world, Supreme Warlord Corvex watched the human president's speech with growing fury. Around him, his war council sat in uncomfortable silence. They mock us, Corvex growled. They defeat one of our fleets, and suddenly, they believe they can challenge the entire Dominion. Perhaps we should reconsider, one advisor suggested carefully. Their technology is clearly superior. A prolonged war could be costly. Corvex silenced him with a glare. The Dominion does not retreat. We do not show weakness. These humans have infected the galaxy with their dangerous ideas. Slaves are rebelling on a dozen worlds because they heard that someone stood up to us. If we do not crush this threat now, everything we have built will crumble. He turned to his military commander. Assemble the Grand Fleet, every ship we have. We will find their homeworld and burn it to ash. We will capture their leaders and execute them publicly. We will show the galaxy that defying the Dominion means death. It will take 6 months to assemble a force of that size, Supreme Warlord. Then begin immediately, and send scouts to find their planet. I want to know everything about these humans. Their strengths, their weaknesses, their fears. Corvex's claws scraped against his throne. They believe they are heroes. They believe they can change the nature of the universe through kindness and mercy. I will teach them the truth. I will teach them that kindness is weakness, and the universe belongs to the strong. Back at Sanctuary Point, Admiral Pierce received the intelligence report about the Dominion's mobilization. He read it carefully, then shared it with his staff. 6 months, Captain Grant said. That's not much time to prepare. No, Pierce agreed. But we won't be preparing alone. He looked at the map of their growing alliance. 43 species had now joined the compact of free peoples. Shipyards were being built. Technologies were being shared. Training programs were teaching warriors from a dozen worlds to fight together. The Corax think this is about weapons, Pierce said quietly. They think whoever has the most ships wins. But they're wrong. This is about ideas. And ideas are a lot harder to kill than battleships. He turned to face his officers, the same calm certainty in his eyes that Warlord Sithax had found so unsettling. When they come, we'll be ready. Not just with ships and weapons, but with something they don't understand and can't defeat. He paused. We'll be ready with hope. 1 year after the first battle, the Corax Grand Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of human-claimed territory. 2,000 warships filled the darkness of space, supported by 100,000 fighters and bombers. It was the largest military force ever assembled in that region of the galaxy. carrying millions of warriors bred for conquest and death. Supreme Warlord Korvax stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and surveyed his armada with fierce pride. This was the full might of his civilization, gathered for a single purpose: to destroy the humans and restore the natural order of the universe. "Signal all ships," he commanded. "Prepare for combat. Today we teach the galaxy that hope is an illusion and only power is real." His fleet moved forward in perfect formation, weapons charging, shields activating. Ahead of them, sensors detected a human fleet waiting at the border. Korvax smiled when he saw the numbers. "They have assembled perhaps 500 ships to face us," his tactical officer reported. "A brave but futile gesture. They came to die with dignity," Korvax said. "I can respect that at least. Target their flagship. I want Admiral Pierce captured alive. I will execute him personally." The Dominion fleet advanced. Fighters launched in swarms. Weapon systems locked onto targets. In minutes, the battle would begin. Then space began to ripple. "What is happening?" Korvax demanded. "Jump signatures, Supreme Warlord." "Many of them." "Very many." Around the human fleet, reality tore open in hundreds of places. Ships emerged from every direction, filling space with an armada that dwarfed even the Dominion's grand fleet. Human vessels, yes, but also Morathi battlecruisers and Volanti science ships, Dormian engineering platforms and Talari scout frigates, Voss destroyers and Harton carriers, and ships from a dozen other species. 10,000 vessels surrounded the Korax fleet. "Impossible," Korvax breathed. "This is impossible." Admiral Pierce's face appeared on his view screen, the same calm expression he had worn in their first encounter. "Good morning, Supreme Warlord. I see you brought your entire fleet. That's convenient. Saves us the trouble of hunting them down later. You..." Korvax struggled to find words. "How? How did you assemble this force?" "These species hate each other. They have warred among themselves for centuries." "They did," Pierce agreed, "until they found something they hated more than each other. Amazing how a common enemy brings people together." "This changes nothing," Korvax snarled, regaining his composure. "We are Korax. We do not surrender. We will fight to the last ship, the last warrior." "I know." Pierce's voice carried a strange sadness. "That's what I was afraid of. Which is why I'm going to offer you one more chance. One last opportunity to choose differently." "You dare to offer mercy to the Dominion?" "Not mercy, Supreme Warlord. Wisdom." Pierce leaned forward slightly. "Look around you. Look at this fleet. Every species here has suffered under your rule. The Volanti lost their homeworld. The Mordathi lost generations of warriors. The Dormians lost their freedom. They have every reason to want revenge. They have every reason to demand your destruction. Then let them try. They don't want to." Pierce paused to let that sink in. "I asked them. Before we came here, I spoke with representatives from every species in this alliance. I asked them what they wanted. Do you know what they said?" Korvax remained silent, his claws gripping his throne. "They said they wanted it to stop. The killing, the conquering, the endless cycle of violence. They didn't want revenge. They wanted peace." Pierce's voice softened. "The Volanti lost everything, and when I asked them what they wanted from the Korax, their ambassador said she wanted your children to grow up in a galaxy where they didn't have to become monsters to survive." For a long moment, no one spoke. Across two fleets, millions of beings waited in tense silence. "You're lying," Korvax finally said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "I'm not. And somewhere inside yourself, you know it?" Pierce gestured at the surrounding armada. "We could destroy your fleet right now. Our combined firepower would overwhelm you in minutes. But we're not here for destruction. We're here to show you something. Show me what? That there's another way. That the strong don't have to crush the weak. That species can work together instead of conquering each other. That the universe doesn't have to be the brutal place your ancestors believed it was. Korvax stared at the human admiral, at the strange creature who had somehow united half the galaxy against him. He thought about his own childhood, about the brutal training that had turned him into a warrior. He thought about the slaves he had taken, the worlds he had burned, the lives he had ended without remorse. He thought about his own children, and what they would have to become to survive in the empire he had built. "What are you asking of me?" he said at last. "Surrender. Stand down your fleet. Allow us to escort your ships back to Dominion space. Then sit down with us and talk. Not as enemies, but as neighbors. Help us build something better than what came before. And if I refuse?" Pierce's expression did not change. "Then we will defend ourselves. We will protect the species who have trusted us. And your fleet will be destroyed, not because we want to destroy it, but because you have left us no other choice." The silence stretched on. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Korvax's officers waited for the order to attack. On 10,000 Allied ships, warriors prepared to fight and die for the future they had been promised. Then, slowly, Supreme Warlord Korvax did something that no Korax leader had done in recorded history. He rose from his throne, walked to the communications panel, and opened a channel to his entire fleet. "All ships," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of 1,000 years of tradition crumbling around him. "Stand down. Power down weapons. Hold position, Supreme Warlord." His tactical officer gasped. "We have been soldiers all our lives," Korvax said quietly. "We have known nothing but war. Perhaps it is time to learn something else." He turned back to the view screen, to Admiral Pierce's waiting face. "I accept your terms, human. I will sit with you and talk. But I make no promises about what comes next." "That's all I ask," Pierce replied. "That you give peace a chance to prove itself." The Korax fleet powered down its weapons. The Allied armada held its fire. And across the galaxy, beings of 100 different species watched in amazement as the impossible happened. The war ended before it truly began. 3 years later, Ambassador Thelavin stood on a balcony in the newly built Galactic Council chambers, watching ships from every corner of settled space arrive for the annual celebration. Human vessels flew alongside Korax warships. Mordathi and Dormian children played together in the station's parks. The Lanthi artists had created a massive sculpture commemorating the Alliance, a twisted spiral of metal and light that represented the many paths leading to a single future. Admiral Pierce, now retired from active duty, stood beside her. "I never thought I would see this," Thelavin said softly. "When I sent that distress signal, I expected to die. I never imagined it would lead to this." "Neither did we," Pierce admitted. "When we first detected your message, we didn't know what we would find. We just knew we couldn't ignore it." "Why?" It was the same question she had asked him years ago, but now it carried a different weight. "Of all the things humanity could have done with your technology, your power, why choose this path?" Pierce thought about it for a long moment. "Because we remembered what it felt like to be alone and afraid. Because we decided that the universe we wanted to live in was one where distress signals got answered. Because someone had to prove that kindness was stronger than cruelty. And we figured it might as well be us." He smiled at her, the same warm smile he had given her on the day they first met. "And because hope is contagious, Ambassador. Once you give it to people, they have a hard time letting it go. They start believing that things can get better. They start working to make it happen. Before you know it, you've got 10,000 ships willing to fight for a future worth living in." Thalavin's skin shifted to a deep, vibrant blue, the color of peace and gratitude and something more. the color of a species that had found its place in a galaxy transformed. "Thank you," she said simply. For answering, Pierce nodded. "That's what we do." Above them, the stars shone with the light of 1,000 inhabited worlds, each one now part of something larger than itself. The age of conquest was ending. The age of cooperation was beginning. And it had all started with a desperate signal sent into the darkness by people who had lost everything except hope. Somewhere out there, humanity knew other signals were still being sent. Other species were still suffering, still running, still waiting for someone to answer. And humanity would keep listening, because that's what they did.